been getting very mixed reviews, and I think the problem is with this subtitle, the musical. That does it no justice at all.
Really?
It's staggering, stunning in an audience. So what we have is a night with. It's as if she's in concert. She's sitting on the stage, she's swinging from a bottle, and she's singing and giving us little memories, thoughts on life.
I think I see where you're going, because some critics have said it's a fantastic individual performance that sits in an empty vessel of a show.
Yeah.
And you're saying that that's because the expectations of what the show is have been wrong.
Yes, I agree. And I do think that it's obviously a very loving show. There's very little reference to drugs. There's a bit of a throwaway comment. So we don't really look at the demons. What we do is we explore womanhood very powerfully, but also the blues.
How long do we have to see this?
This one it's on until September the 28th. It's on at the Peacock, which is just down by Aldwych in
Quite
London.
a small auditorium, actually.
No, it's a big auditorium. So the Peacock is it's a bit of a barn of a room. And again, I would say this show might be better in a slightly smaller venue, but I cannot recommend the performances highly enough.
GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking,
this is the nightmare for the Conservatives again.
down to earth,
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
and most importantly, honest,
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, though.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This Monday, the king of breakfast TV is back. That's right, Britain's favourite TV host, Eamon Holmes, returns to Britain's hottest breakfast programme. Breakfast every day from 6 a.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
And welcome back to Headliners with me, Simon Evans, him, Paul Cox, them, Kerry Marks. We start with The Express. You've been non-binary, Kerry.
Not just that.
I don't write the rules. We start with The Express, and unwilling to be outdone despite not enjoying many perks, Ed Miliband has found another way to alienate voters, Kerry.
He has indeed, yeah. So Ed Miliband, who's on a mission, this is how he describes it himself, he's a clean energy superpower mission that he's on. He only needs a cape, really, and people are going off the boil, I might say, about this new idea of a tax. It's not actually a new idea of a tax, it's a tax that the Tories tried to bring in and realised it wasn't going to work. It kind of came and went very fast.
Yeah.
It's described here, it says, more Ed Miliband madness as Labour revives hated boiler tax. Now, that's not the name of the tax. It's not called the hated boiler tax. Otherwise, they may as well call it that.
A bit like the spare room tax, though, wasn't it? They always have a new name that comes along that tells people.
Yes, exactly. That becomes instantly unpopular, and everyone says no. You get a firm no from the country, yeah. So originally the Tories tried to bring it out to replace boilers with heat pumps, which are very expensive. They cost anything up to £18,000 to install, which is 12 times the average £1,500 charge for fitting a new gas boiler. So the government's infrastructure chief, Sir John Ammett, said no to that some while ago. It wouldn't, and it really pointed out many reasons why it wouldn't work. But now Ed Miliband has stepped back in and said, this can work, guys. And the way he's going to do it is to insist that companies make the heat pumps, which the companies are then saying that people aren't going to buy them at this price, so they're going to have to put up the price of the normal boilers. So effectively what you end up with is an enforced heat pump charity contribution when you're buying a boiler. So you'll still have a boiler, but you'll be paying a lot more for it.
So you won't be able to, if your boiler packs in, you won't be able to just go and choose according to the price. The price of a new boiler will be artificially elevated to make the heat pump seem more...
Not even artificially elevated, like actually elevated.
Yeah. Well, no,
but for that
it's
reason,
not by
I know what you
demand
mean.
and
Yeah,
supply. The demand is there.
yes, in that sense, yes.
So
absolutely.
I am slightly, because I'm just slightly wary of the news. It says heat pumps can cost anything up to 18 grand.
Yes.
Which is 12 times the average. So they've gone the top. Like if you've got an 18-room mansion, that will cost I don't know. But
there'll also be a load of gas fitters out there going, well, that's just undermined my whole business because it costs me, it costs 2,000 quid or 2,500.
Learn how to do it. If, like me, you've got a young lad at home who's wondering what to do as a career, learn how to fit heat pumps. This could be a big,
it's not a bad idea. Or at least build a business that employs people that does.
Yeah.
Are heat pumps the future then? Is that going to happen inevitably at some point?
I think what's happening here...
Being a plumber...
Yes, I was a plumber.
I don't know.
No, I never have done. No, you don't.
I don't know whether any of us have any expertise on this, do we?
I really don't. They're so resolutely sure, Labour, that they are doing the right thing the whole time.
Yeah.
That they seem to be unable to adapt to public opinion. They don't go with the ebb and flow of public opinion or see, is it right to talk about it now? Is it wrong to talk about it now? Ed Miliband in particular, he seems like, whatever he is, energy czar, he seems to be completely detached from the rest of politics.
Yeah.
And it's just pursuing this.
He's going to save the planet, isn't he? He's definitely on a mission
he's been
now.
Told at some point that that's exactly what he's doing.
Yes.
He's been talking about this for years. His moment has come. And they are going full steam ahead into any policy, no matter how damaging it could be. And I feel like this is never going to get off the ground. I don't actually feel in the end it'll be damaging. I think that, you know, if the market can't afford it, if you tell a boiler manufacturer that you now are mandated to build so many of these a year, they will do. They'll find a way of doing it cheaply. But it's not that, it's selling them. And if customers can't afford to buy them, you're just going to have piles and piles of heat pumps doing absolutely nothing.
It's a dystopian...
I was going to say, it sounds... There's a film waiting to happen, isn't there? Soil and Green will be a thing of the past.
There's certainly an investment opportunity there. Daily Mail now, Paul, and an interesting line of defence from the disgraced Harrods boss's son or sons.
Yes. Furious Mohammed Al-Fayed's son says allegations that his father raped five of his young women is a BBC plot to distract from Hugh, as he calls claims outrageous. I'm not sure that it's a distraction. I mean, it's convenient for the BBC, and Lord knows that they'd like a distraction. This comes from Omar Al-Fayed. He's 36, so he's quite young considering that his dad died a couple of years ago at 94. And he's an environmentalist and publisher, and he told a friend, I think the Beeb have had this in their back pocket. Now, the only thing we really do know about as they brought Hugh Edwards in, the only thing we do know is that Hugh Edwards pleaded guilty to his crime, and he is convicted of that.
Yeah.
Now, Al-Fayed is dead and yet to be convicted of anything, yet to be charged. I'm not quite sure what happens now. I mean, I don't want to undermine anything because, you know, there's quite clearly, it feels like something very big is building. Each day it feels like different component parts.
I don't know how the law would work, but I can't imagine anyone else would get dragged in just by family reputation or Harrods. I suppose the question is if there were enablers, people who knew and actively sort of allowed the rapes and so on to go on, that might have legal... But as a dead man, there's no criminal case to be made. I've got to say, I think it's, as is the implication of the headline, pretty distasteful to say that this is the BBC. These are very, very serious crimes. Hugh Edwards... And it's not the same crime. Hugh Edwards was guilty of a sickening... a very serious
allegations,
legal transgression. But it's not the same as raping, say. It's not a series of rapes.
No.
There was a point, for instance, just to draw one comparison, after the Me Too thing in Hollywood, they made a movie which was sort of about Me Too at Fox TV. It was called Blonde Bombshell or something like that. It was about a sort of culture in which would-be TV presenters were expected to sort of pass the casting couch at Fox TV. And it seemed to me that was an attempt by Hollywood to go, look, they're all at it. It was not just here, it was on the news networks as well.
Sure, that does happen.
It's an echo, right? This is not the same sort of thing, is it?
No, and it seems extremely conniving. I don't think the BBC, whether they would do something like that, whether they would put it out, maybe, and say the timing is good, possibly, but whether he's sort of suggesting they're making up the charges. For the sake. That's not just putting out a documentary with this timing to take the pressure away. It's more saying that they're really sort of trumping up the whole thing. He actually says, I think the BBC had this up their back pocket rather than in their back pocket, which I think is a rather unfortunate wording. But it's not clear who he said this to be honest. It says he has told friends, but were they filming him? Why do we know this about? But
his friends get in touch. I mean,
a son might make that or have this belief about his father, and also because there has been, of course, some allegations and accusations for some time that the establishment have been trying to get Mohammed Al-Fayed. And it's hard to know. From his point of view, that might be a thing.
I remember when I watched the episode of The Crown, there were several episodes of The Crown in which Al-Fayed figured, and obviously Diana and Dodi. It was implied that they knew things about him that meant that he was really persona non grata in royal circles, and he, of course, was constantly convinced that he was being victimised and that Prince Philip in particular despised him, hence the rumours that Prince Philip, was, that whole crazy kind of conspiracy theory. But it begins to look as if the royal information, the intelligence they were gathering was
had some accuracy to it. This is all posthumous, but at the same time, it's an important inquiry. There's apparently 100 women who've come forward.
Yeah, I think this could be... it's difficult to discuss it. I think everything you said was right, Simon.
Yeah, good news in the eye now, Kerry. Looks like lots of compensation coming the way of those most affected by the construction of HS2, namely other train firms.
Yeah, we're talking about around about 300 million in compensation to train firms. So this is train companies that want compensation for losses during the building of HS2, even though they're soon to be nationalised, which would seem to make the whole thing kind of redundant if that's happening. Anyway, exactly, yes. Or to each other briefly and then back to us or something. And we're told there's going to be a lot of chaos around Paddington for the next 6 years, particularly during Christmas. Apparently Christmas is the best time to be building railways. I'm not quite sure why that is. And at the same time, we're being told of lots of disruptions that are coming, and that there's a possibility of building an alternative rail service to replace the HS2 that was going to happen between Birmingham and Manchester, which I don't understand at all, because what they're saying is there was going to be a rail service called the HS2 between Birmingham and Manchester, which got axed. So instead we're going to replace it with a rail service between Birmingham and Manchester.
which already runs, by the way.
It's just going to be...
There is already a...
damn it, you can get from Birmingham to Manchester via rail.
I'm sure I did that once as well,
But this is replacing the new thing that's not happening with the new thing that will be happening, which doesn't sound like there's any replacement at all. But...
the old rails with the new was same sort of width and...
Well, maybe, but I don't think so.
The HS2 was is bigger rail...
a whole different line. I mean, there is a spokesman here for HS2 that said they were unable to provide the details of the compensation payments or any future estimates, as they're considered commercially sensitive. So the fact is, we're never going to know what this costs anyway. And the only thing that HS2 seems to have delivered beyond Greater London is disappointment.
We have time to very, very quickly look at your favourite story from this section. Is she black?
My favourite story. Is she black? Janet Jackson makes shocking comments about Kamala Harris' heritage. So Janet Jackson said, she's not black. That's what I heard. That she's Indian and her father's white. That's what I was told. I don't know who told her this. I mean, I believe that's incorrect to believe that her mother's Irish and her dad...
What they're trying to do, what the Independent are trying to do is suggest that Donald Trump's sort of insinuation...
He's got this influence, power.
Exactly.
But the rest of the article just insists paragraph after paragraph that she is definitely black.
Yeah.
I mean, they're sure she is black.
They've got evidence.
But also, we don't know whether...
She knows the lyrics to Bob Marley songs.
Yeah, she can jump in basketball or something, but what's the test?
But
isn't that the sort of thing that, racist white people say?
I know.
I'm not racist.
I've got loads of black heritage.
We don't know whether Janet Jackson knows that she's black.
No.
They should have asked her that to find out first, get a rough medium on this.
Trump was suggesting that she didn't kind of promote her black heritage. He suggested that she presented as Indian and now she's black. Whether that's true or not, but it's a slightly different thing from actually...
Well, the thing is, for Janet Jackson, it's her truth, which we have to believe now. We have to believe women and believe black people, which is a real problem on this one. Because which one do you choose?
It's difficult to talk about, isn't it? Because I go along with this theory. I mean, what do you do? I mean, Kamala Harris has played the Indian card, has played the black card. She is both. She can choose to do whatever she likes.
She is. She's mixed race. And meanwhile, if Kemi Badenoch can claim to be working class, Kamala Harris can be black.
Yeah.
We've hit the halfway point. Coming up, is Angela Rayner a Dalekophobe? And what next for the Muslim vote? And is the BBC comparable to Stalin's Russia? See you in a couple of minutes.
Hello there, good evening. Welcome to your GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. Hope you have managed to have a decent weekend, though some of us have been dodging heavy pulses of rain around, and they'll be continuing into next week as well. Even throughout the end of Sunday evening, parts of Wales, central southern areas of England have those heavy outbreaks of rain to contend with. It is slightly drier further towards the north, with some clearer spells holding on for parts of western Scotland at least, and underneath that things could turn a little bit chilly. Some rural spots seeing a touch of frost, but for most of us underneath the cloud and rain, it certainly will be a mild, muggy night, temperatures around 15 or 16 degrees Celsius. An amber weather warning does come into force from Monday morning, and that stretches from parts of Gloucestershire, Herefordshire, up through the Midlands and over towards the Humber and the Wash, where we could see over a month's worth of rain falling on Monday. So some localised flooding and disruption is possible, so do please take care over the course of the day. Quite cloudy for Northern Ireland and generally cloudier as well for much of Scotland. There are a few sunnier breaks, hopefully holding on for the likes of Dumfries and Galloway, but we will start to see some rain arriving into the very far north of Scotland during the day, and that will continue to push its way southwards into the likes of the Highlands of Lewis and Harris later on. Those outbreaks of rain will continue on and off for much of Wales, central, northeastern parts of England during the day. A few brighter spells trying to poke their way through across the southeast, still though with a few showers here. Temperatures in that sunshine managing to climb towards 21 degrees Celsius, but elsewhere generally feeling cooler between 15 or 16 degrees Celsius. The low pressure that is bringing this area of heavy rain will gradually move its way off eastwards as we do head into Tuesday, so things will be turning drier and a little bit calmer for Wales and England on Tuesday itself, though still relatively cloudy and any bright spells fairly limited. We'll also see that rain gradually push its way southwards across more areas of Scotland, with some brisk winds around at times, and those northerly winds will start to feed in some cooler air as well. So things are set to be turning colder for many of us as we head over the forthcoming week. Bye-bye.
Tune in to Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. GB News royalty with your perfect start to the weekend. Lucky us! Feisty and fearless guests.
Well, I'm a normal person, so ask me.
Honest opinions that raises more questions than a Gary Barlow tax return. And a few surprises along the way.
Might be cold in this studio.
That is Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. 8 to 9 only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Britain I grew up in was the most peaceful, gentle society that has ever existed. That has been destroyed.
Opinion polls show immigration is the #1 concern to the British public. Are you proud to be British?
Yeah, I'm ever so proud.
My name is Stephen Edgington, and in this documentary, I want to find out how Britain became a nation of immigrants. Immigration, the truth, available at gbnews.com.
Welcome back to Headliner. So Kerry Metro have all the latest bants from the Labour Party conference, and in particular an attempt to reach out to the Whovians.
Yes, well, I didn't see the speech today, but it sounds like I missed out, because it seems like it was great fun and hilarious. It actually got ripples of laughter, apparently.
Ripples.
So
something I'd kill for.
But to be fair, it's a conference speech. It's not going to be particularly about policy necessarily at this point. It's about getting applause and getting everyone together. So the way she's doing that is by bringing up something that happened a few months ago with Kemi Badenoch and her comments about transgender and so on, and David Tennant's reaction to it. A feud with it. She said it was bad enough when they wanted to deal with Farage. Now she's doing side deals with the Daleks. She didn't then add, which she should have done, "We will misgender you," but she didn't do that, which is a real shame, really.
She's not pronouncing bad enough.
Bad enough.
Without making it
worse.
Stick now.
Yeah.
basically, it all happened months ago, but Doctor Who puns are timeless, so she threw one in.
I mean, it's a great way of creating, like, getting yourself on the right side. As she's basically thought, I don't know, the British people, they're probably broadly speaking more David Tennant than
Yes, so she's trying to push them one way or the other.
It felt like a comedian who didn't have a segue.
Yeah.
She needed to mention the David and Tennant thing in order to get to her Dalek joke. So it's like the Dalek joke came before the David.
Oh, do you think so? Do you think she started off with the Dalek joke and then she thought, phew, there's a way of getting this, shoving it in there?
Somehow, yeah. The segue is just terrible. The interesting part of this is she fails to mention. She only mentions one side of the argument. There was two parts to that argument, and David Tennant actually told Kerry Badnock to shut up. And wish that she didn't exist.
Yeah,
that was by a tweet, wasn't it?
Yeah, it wasn't.
He didn't actually say to her.
No, it was at an award ceremony.
Oh, was it? Right. Okay.
And
right.
he named her. Yeah.
Yeah, so if you're going to do that, again,
that's a weird award.
So naive. Who is? I mean, I think the Labour Party in particular think that they're almost slightly more religious than God. That they're sent to help the UK, and therefore they can say these things and everyone will support them. They just don't see the counter to it. Somebody should just be stood in the office going, "Are you sure? Do we want to get the Dalek?"
I'm sorry, Paul, but I don't think God's religious. I'm more religious than God. I think he's the one person who would not be religious at all. Like, he definitely would believe in himself, right?
Was Christ a Christian? But that's another question altogether.
He was Jewish.
I do think Doctor Who has probably replaced Christianity as a
well, it has to some people.
Religion.
I never really watched it.
iNews now, Paul, with a story about the Muslim vote, which doesn't seem to regard the very existence of such a thing as remotely problematic. But anyway.
No, they don't seem to mention that too much in this story, but this isn't about Gaza. That's not what I'm saying to you, Simon. This is what the headline says. Why Labour risks losing some Muslim voters for good. So the Muslim vote, which is now known as TMV, led the mobilisation of millions of voters, which they did do, that saw 5 Labour candidates lose out to pro-Gaza independents. And we did see this. And the Gaza situation appears to be a huge domestic issue for some people. I mean, for me, it's not a domestic issue at all. It doesn't in any way solve knife crime, stop freezing the elderly, getting, social mobilisation, getting people into work, all the things that we need to do, children, all these things. So, but irrespective of whether I think that or not, there are people that are very, very, very focused on the Gaza issue, and it's winning votes.
And I would also add, it doesn't do anything to solve the Gaza issue either, does it?
Of course it doesn't. I was driving from Devon to Dorset yesterday, and on the side of the A35, I think it was, it just said, "Stop war. No more war in Gaza." And
that's beautiful.
I thought to myself, if only more people read this. Why didn't anybody just tell us what the answer was and we'd just stop doing it? What happens here and what happens in our parliament makes no difference whatsoever. Really, it doesn't. We know that because of all the rhetoric from people like David Lammy. He's making no difference or headway whatsoever.
Well, it's not even making any difference to what Americans and American students have been protesting, and there's been big marches. And America really does have some leverage over Israel, but still nothing changes. So, yeah.
It's a worry to see one policy parties now, which... sorry, you're about to move off something.
No, I agree.
And the question is really that it started off being about Gaza, but let's say that war stops now. Do those parties stay in, and what is their new policy? Because this is what we're saying here is it doesn't stop there, but it doesn't really give us a clue. OK, well, what is the next thing then? Because this is now a new kind of pressure, and particularly on foreign policy that we haven't had before.
It'll be like when Stonewall, how Stonewall decided what to do after they achieved gay marriage. They go around looking for the next issue, basically.
That's all that happened there.
Daily Mail, Kerry, suggestions that banning conversion therapy could be an own goal. That's a rugby-based pun.
It was. Conversion therapy ban could backfire and stop doctors analysing root causes of patients' distress. Now, this is interesting. This is a UN expert, which we don't normally see UN experts get involved in this kind of thing in this way, but this is Reem Al-Salem, who's the UN Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women and Girls, and she's warning against a bill which the Labour government revealed in its King's Speech in July this year proposals for a conversion practices bill. So that would stop conversion therapy. I think there's a real problem here that we don't really know what conversion therapy is, because I think when we think about it as something like gay conversion therapy of the past, largely done by the church, which involved, whether it's electric shock treatment or tying weights to testicles, but I'm not sure whether that was just a Not 9 O'Clock News sketch or whether that was a real thing. I've started thinking. I've started believing it was real. Yeah, absolutely. It's one of those things that in itself it sounds wrong, but then we are talking about young people, and whether this law will stop families and doctors being able to have a chat with someone, even to discuss their decisions. If you think about it, we don't even allow that with assisted dying, with old people. We don't let them make a decision that big without a large amount of discussion to happen first. So why we would allow impressionable young people to just decide that they are a different gender and so on is
I'm
beyond me.
slightly baffled. I mean, I have read through this. I cannot quite understand why banning conversion therapy would stop people still being able to access therapy, in which they're able to discuss their dysphoria or however they want to discuss it.
Do you know what? I'm glad you said that, Simon, because you're a very clever man. And I have read this, and I couldn't quite see that either. It does suggest that this is like a train on a track, and if there are no stops, if you get on this train, you are converted no matter what. Now, this doesn't impact me personally, it really doesn't, but I don't think that's particularly important, because one thing I do think is important is protecting children. And a lot of this doesn't really protect children. I know, it's weird, isn't it? You can get in trouble for saying, I'd like to protect children. But genuinely, this doesn't... Why I still don't... Maybe because it doesn't impact me personally, I still don't fully understand why we have to act on a 7 or 8 or 9-year-old child. No. We simply don't. We can wait until surely they're adult and they can get involved in the process themselves.
But of course, and the attempt to brand it or characterise it as conversion therapy was a very cynical thing anyway. I think exactly for the very reason that Kerry said, that the conversion therapy in people's minds was an attempt to pray away the gay and all that sort of thing.
Yes, it was something medieval and really, really nasty. But
OK, BBC News now, Paul, and the Times slyly suggesting that they are in the grip of a cult of celebrity, something that Headliners has deftly avoided, of course.
Well, you're a celebrity.
You're being really cutting tonight, And it hurts. We have feelings.
I don't.
Not many.
None in my head. Is the cult of celebrity eating the BBC? So this is talking about the Hugh Edwards scandal, shows that unchecked power, i.e. the talent, is undermining the corporation. And there have been big controversies in the past, of course, not just Hugh Edwards, things like Russell Brand and Jonathan Ross. Obviously, more latterly, Gary Lineker, Emily Maitlis, Martin Bashir. John Sopel, I'd say, is a problem for them as well. He really does get away with a lot, John Sopel.
Well, he's on the newsagents now as well, isn't he? He's another one of the ones that's left. But the Maitlis, Sopel and I can't remember his name, the chap from Newsnight.
as well,
They have demonstrated that there was a certain kind of bias, I think, fairly fundamentally within the newsroom.
And do you know what? Now they're on their own, fair play to them. But it does have that. But it says the BBC has astonishing powers of survival. It doesn't. No. I see this so often. The BBC has a guaranteed revenue from the taxpayer. If I ran a business that no matter what got a guaranteed revenue from the taxpayer, I'd have astonishing powers of survival as well.
And the sad thing is, I mean, they repeated an advert, I think it was from the 1980s recently. It was on Twitter a lot. It was John Cleese in a pub saying, what's the BBC ever done for us, like on the air.
Yeah. Yes.
And there's all these people like David Attenborough and Terry Wogan and Dimbleby and so on explaining all the programmes. And it's still incredible, the recognisable people, the heart of the culture. They just couldn't make an advert like that now. They got virtually, they would have, I guess, Lineker, and that, I don't know who else they would have at this point that would have that level of recognition. But I will say, I think it is a bit cynical to make a claim that Hugh Edwards has exposed a cult of celebrity. Hugh Edwards was a very high-profile newsreader who turned out to have a really disturbing, dark secret.
Well,
but he wasn't somebody who was indulged in any meaningful way. Fairly obviously, Russell Brand was indulged. Years ago, Savile was indulged.
Yeah.
And to an extent...
Rolf Harris, Stuart Hall...
Yeah, they probably knew. I don't think there's any suggestion, really, that anyone knew what Hugh Edwards was...
I think, though, the point they're making is more about whether the cult of celebrity has become more more of a thing and whether they give more credence to someone who's got... Yeah, really, which is arguable. I think, Bruce Forsyth had tremendous power in his time, but I think back then we kind of believed everyone was wholesome because we just didn't have the social media and everything we have now and all the information. And also, the temperament has changed in that if there is a scandal like this, then it would have been covered up in the past, whereas now companies just can't risk doing that anymore. So that everything comes out fast.
We had Frank Boff.
Yes.
You don't remember Frank Boff?
Yes, exactly. Well,
you're always going to get like Hugh Edwards was going to get chucked into this for a while. It's a bit like if you ask who the greatest British comedians or musicians are of the time, you're always going to get someone.
It's from the current week. Yeah. Anyway, let's move on to our. Well, I think we should probably go to the break now. Actually, checking the sign. In the final section, we have taboo-busting dating apps and taboo-busting behaviour in Sussex too. We'll see you in a couple of minutes.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Luis Elizondo says that he worked at the Pentagon and that he knows that they have recovered material that is not from this Earth. He resigned after believing his government wasn't taking the threat of UFOs seriously. So have they been covering up alien material from us?
I don't think the claims that are being made in Luis Elizondo's book, Imminent, are new. But I think what we have to pay attention to is the seniority of, one, Luis Elizondo, and two, the people who recruited him, and indeed the people he worked for, which was the Department of Defense and the Pentagon.
Do you think that he was in a position to know about this?
Yeah, he would have been. He would have been speaking to the individuals who were taking part in these investigations. You're showing some of those clips just now that potential incursions by objects controlled by a non-human intelligence, potentially. We're not saying alien necessarily, but something non-human.
Seems a bit far-fetched to me, Andrew. I'm a sceptic.
When people say sceptical, I think as a species, we're relatively new in terms of what we do in space. But right now, we've got a robot on Mars that drives about and has a little helicopter drone that every so often comes up, flies about away 10 feet from it to collect samples and comes back. Now, a species a couple of hundred years down the line from us would have far better technology than that. So who's to say what we're encountering aren't just really advanced probes from something else that's just slightly ahead of us in the technological scale? I don't think that's too far stretch of the imagination.
When you do see things like what we just saw there, which was made public, the New York Times did a big expose on all of this, and actually, the world didn't end. We weren't all outside fighting each other for scraps of food and burning down the nearest Lidl, were we? We just thought, oh, that's quite cool.
I think now we have to look at it and maybe take a step back, look at the people coming out now, talking about UFOs and thinking, is there something to this that we've maybe been overlooking?
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
This Monday, the king of breakfast TV is back. That's right, Britain's favourite TV host, Eamon Holmes, returns to Britain's hottest breakfast programme. Breakfast every day from 6 a.m. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
And welcome back to the final section of Headliner. So we have news now of the new spirit of sexual liberation in Ireland, if not downright degeneracy, Paul.
A little bit, yeah. Surge in the use of taboo-free dating app Field, spelled F-E-E-L-D, and I'm going to pronounce it Field, because I have no idea how it's pronounced. But experts believe people have become tired of typical dating and no longer feel the stigma around different sexual interest. And Field allows users to set up a profile as an individual or as a couple for those interested in ethical non-monogamy, polyamory, casual sex, kink and swinging. This basically describes people just looking for sex. It's an app to find sex, which I don't think is new.
No.
And it does feel to me like each generation believes they either
reinvented sex,
or reinvent sex. I mean, they obviously haven't read Roman or Greek history, but for me, it's not new. It's just we found new ways of describing things, and now we've got new technology which enables to access it. And all power to it. You know, if you as a couple or an individual want to go out there and find sex whichever way you like it, why not?
I suppose there is. I mean, what this article seems to be suggesting, although I think it's still slightly old news, is that Ireland is emerging from the sort of darkness of theocracy.
Well, I think they did that some time ago.
I think so. Yes, exactly.
There could be a bit of that, couldn't there?
Yeah.
But I'm not sure whether they're just saying Ireland or whether this is... They're using Ireland as an example, but whether this is a general trend that's going on where young people, thanks to these apps and these choices that are available to them now, are being filthier and more fetishy than they've ever been. As soon, well, they did. They waited until I got too old to join in with this new fun they're all having, and then they sort of like went all crazy on it. But it's they make it sound like it's particularly permissive. I'm not sure where it is. I have noticed that women are far more open and brazen in sexual stories and so on now, in a way that men have stopped doing. I've noticed this occasionally in like dressing rooms and so on, where a woman will just out the blue say something like, "Oh, have you noticed my bruises here? It's from having sex in a car." And I never asked you that.
Wow.
And in a way that men used to tell these stories, right? But I think men have stopped. Huh?
It certainly never happened to me.
I'll tell you which comedy clubs and who I'm talking about in a little while. I don't know, but the fetish sex apparently has increased amongst younger people. And I did read an article a while ago that was saying there was a theory on this, that it's actually to do with this kind of sex allows for an inherent way of dealing with inhibitions and permissions and limits, which actually makes things a bit easier, and so it's not really necessarily full on. It's more more gameplay a lot.
Well, if
a lot
you
of
could
it.
put it on the form while you're still online at home, I suppose, instead of actually sort of staring somebody in the eyes and explaining to them that you're into a certain...
Yes, and not dealing with it in the moment, I guess.
Anyway, there's a rather unpleasant and unseemly events in sleepy Sussex that we probably preferred simply stayed on an online form.
Yes, keep it online, you're right. The phantom pooper, as he's described, he leaves his mark again. We don't want to know about that mark. And so this is a guy who apparently climbs on it. Well, there's one video of him climbing on the top of a garage and having a poo. And apparently they're making a big deal about the fact he carries toilet paper around with him. I don't know whether that's to say, yes, I mean, he's bad, but he's not that awful, you know. But he crouches over a garage. This is worse for the person who's trying to park their car, obviously. But he's been spotted a few times, and, you know, maybe when he was a child he wasn't allowed to poo off a garage, and now he's just, like, trying to catch up with all that.
It's another one of those things, once you get away with it once, it's like James Bond, isn't it, in Casino Royale? You know, the second time's easier.
Yes. Yes.
Let's try and
I love the fact that someone says that one of the people says he must surely have a reason. what reason could you surely have?
Mirror, Paul, appropriately enough, for the Ronnie O'Sullivan of Gurning. This will probably be the last story.
World Gurning Championships see record win at face-off fight. So this is Tommy Mattison, who we've obviously all heard of, 52-year-old.
Oh, yeah.
He's won the crown for World Gurning Championships in Cumbria for the 19th time.
That is amazing.
Showing off stark transformations with his face. Now, we've all seen Gurning. He's saying
it's usually done with teeth missing, isn't it?
Yeah, you need your teeth.
That helps, yeah.
To properly Gurn, surely you need no teeth.
And preferably no bones.
Yeah, and then you hold up a big old horse collar. That's the bit, isn't it? Those are the most...
It's freak show stuff. He wants to win 30, and it's made him a celebrity.
Go and do a quick Gurn for us.
I can't do Gurning.
It makes you proud. It makes you proud to be English, doesn't it? Cheese rolling and gurning. It's one of our sports we invented that never caught on anywhere else.
Any American
and the only thing we're good at.
Exactly. At some point, what nation do you think would do it better? There's a potential.
That's a weird choice.
I like the idea that we could seed one last kind of competition sport.
I mean,
maybe the Olympics for 28.
I find it funny how this is passed down the family. There's several examples here going, my dad used to do it, or my mum used to do it, so now I do it as well. And I wanted to be an astronaut, you know.
There's got to be a genetic element, isn't there?
Yes.
The show is nearly over. Let's take another quick look at Monday's front pages. We have The Guardian, Labour to investigate £600 million COVID contracts given under the Tories. The Mail, now Rayner hires £68,000 vanity photographer. The Daily Telegraph, Reeves, UK must accept hard times or risk ruin. The Mirror has We Will Get Your Money Back. The Eye, Reeves urged not to return to austerity as Labour faces winter fuel revolt. And finally, the Daily Star, the future is orange. Those were your front pages, and that is all we have time for. Thanks to my guests, Paul and Kerry. I'm back tomorrow at 11 p.m. with Josh Howie and Jojo Sutherland. If you're watching at 5 a.m, stay tuned for breakfast. If, on the other hand, you've been staying with us through the night, then it is time for bed. Off you pop and sleep well. See you soon. Take care. Good night.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good evening. Welcome to your GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. Hope you have managed to have a decent weekend, though some of us have been dodging heavy pulses of rain around, and they'll be continuing into next week as well. Even throughout the end of Sunday evening, parts of Wales, central southern areas of England have those heavy outbreaks of rain to contend with. It is slightly drier further towards the north, with some clearer spells holding on for parts of western Scotland at least, and underneath that things could turn a little bit chilly. Some rural spots seeing a touch of frost, but for most of us underneath the cloud and rain, it certainly will be a mild, muggy night, temperatures around 15 or 16 degrees Celsius. An amber weather warning does come into force from Monday morning, and that stretches from parts of Gloucestershire, Herefordshire, up through the Midlands and over towards the Humber and the Wash, where we could see over a month's worth of rain falling on Monday. So some localised flooding and disruption is possible, so do please take care over the course of the day. Quite cloudy for Northern Ireland and generally cloudier as well for much of Scotland. There are a few sunnier breaks, hopefully holding on for the likes of Dumfries and Galloway, but we will start to see some rain arriving into the very far north of Scotland during the day, and that will continue to push its way southwards into the likes of the Highlands of Lewis and Harris later on. Those outbreaks of rain will continue on and off for much of Wales, central, northeastern parts of England during the day. A few brighter spells trying to poke their way through across the southeast, still though with a few showers here. Temperatures in that sunshine managing to climb towards 21 degrees Celsius, but elsewhere generally feeling cooler between 15 or 16 degrees Celsius. The low pressure that is bringing this area of heavy rain will gradually move its way off eastwards as we do head into Tuesday. So things will be turning drier and a little bit calmer for Wales and England on Tuesday itself, though still relatively cloudy and any bright spells are fairly limited. We'll also see that rain gradually push its way southwards across more areas of Scotland, with some brisk winds around at times, and those northerly winds will start to feed in some cooler air as well. So things are set to be turning colder for many of us as we head over the forthcoming week. Bye-bye.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
You could be the next.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
The Britain I grew up in was the most peaceful, gentle society that has ever existed. That has been destroyed.
Opinion polls show immigration is the #1 concern to the British public.
Are you proud to be British?
Yeah, I'm ever so proud.
My name is Stephen Edgington, and in this documentary, I want to find out how Britain became a nation of immigrants. Immigration, the truth, available at gbnews.com.
Very good evening to you from the newsroom. Free Speech Nation up next. First, though, a look at the headlines just after 7 o'clock. The Labour conference has wrapped up for the day after speeches from the Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Secretary David Lammy. Opening the afternoon session today, Cabinet Minister Darren Jones called for Labour to hold power for 5 terms and to make it the natural party of government. Well, earlier, Angela Rayner declared now is Labour's moment, promising to bolster workers' rights, to build high-quality homes and strengthen communities. Take a listen.
There will be no complacency. We've seen where that leads. Don't forget what they did. Partygate, COVID contracts, the lies, division, scapegoating and the unfunded tax cuts for the richest that crashed our economy. Don't forget any of it. The Tories failed Britain and they tried to cover it up. A crater in the heart of Britain's economy, a puncher in the pocket of every working family, and a £22 billion black hole.
Well, that conference is running until Tuesday, ending, of course, with Sir Keir Starmer's leader's speech, which we will bring live to you here on GB News. But the Labour leadership is gearing up for a major conference showdown tomorrow over cuts to the winter fuel payment. Trade unions are demanding a U-turn on the policy, which is set to remove payments from 10 million pensioners across the country. Unite has launched a billboard campaign and is set to hold a protest outside the conference, calling the cuts cruel and politically inept. But Chancellor Rachel Reeves insists the move is necessary to fix a £22 billion budget shortfall. Elsewhere in politics, Reform's leader Nigel Farage sat down with GB News' political editor Christopher Hope at their party conference yesterday. Speaking on Chopper's political podcast, Mr Farage said in order for Reform to make an impact at the local elections next May, the party will have to complete 10 years of evolution in the next 6 months. However, that hasn't stopped him from setting quite the target.
We've got enough people to have 2,300 candidates. The question is, are they the right 2,300 candidates? Because we will be held to a higher standard than everybody else. I'm aiming in those elections to win hundreds of seats.
And you can listen to that full interview on all media platforms. Just search for Chopper's political podcast. In other news, 31 people across the UK have been arrested in a Home Office crackdown on people smuggling gangs. The 3-day nationwide operation involving the National Crime Agency, police and international partners targeted locations including Belfast, Liverpool and Luton. Over £400,000 of cash and fraudulent identity documents were also seized during checks at ports, airports and some road networks. Minister for Border Security Dame Angela Eagle says the government is cracking down on criminal gangs, exploiting vulnerable people and profiting from their despair. We've heard tonight that a second man's been arrested over what police are describing as a shocking kidnap of an 87-year-old man in Oldham. The pensioner was dragged into a car, attacked and then dumped miles from his home, leading to serious injuries. Greater Manchester Police say he did find help by knocking on a door after that incident. 2 men aged 24 and 39 have been arrested on suspicion of kidnap, one of them already released on bail. And finally, they've always been there for us. Well, that's for the past 3 decades anyway, as today marks the 30th birthday of one of the most iconic series of all time. Yes, it's Friends. The show premiered for the first time back in 1994, fast becoming one of the most watched programmes on TV, lasting for 10 whole series. Those are the latest GB News headlines. For now, I'll hand you straight over to Free Speech Nation.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
The Irish government drops new hate speech laws. The chief executive of Rape Crisis Scotland refuses to resign after a recent scandal, and security guards storm a free speech event in Brighton. This is Free Speech Nation. Welcome to Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. This is the show where we take a look at culture, current affairs and politics, and of course, we'll have the latest from those lovable culture warriors. They've really been working overtime this week. Coming up on the show tonight, members of Free Speech Brighton claim they were kicked out of a pub in the city earlier this week after they discussed gender ideology in schools. I'll be joined by 2 individuals from the group to hear what happened. Bernadette Spofforth, the woman who was arrested for allegedly publishing false communications online after the Southport knife attack, has had her case dropped by police with no further action. I'll be speaking to her about her experiences. The Bar Standards Board has launched a consultation to include new equality, diversity and inclusion measures for lawyers to follow. Family lawyer Sarah Phillimore will be here to tell me about what these changes mean. And, of course, myself and my wonderful panel will be answering questions from this rather cheeky studio audience. My comedian guests this evening are Paul Cox and Jojo Sutherland. Hello, Jojo.
Hello.
You are down from Scotland.
Down from Scotland,
Gracing
up
us
from...
with your presence.
I have, yes, gallivanting as always.
As always,
yeah.
You are Jojo the Gallivanter.
Jojo the Gallivanter, living on the M6, I feel like at the moment.
Oh, is that right?
Pretty much, yeah.
But you've been well, have you?
Very well.
Very good.
Annoyingly well.
Annoyingly well. And for a contrast, let's go to Paul.
Suspiciously still alive.
You are still alive.
I know.
Well.
I've travelled quite far this weekend as well. I started my first gig this weekend was in Barnstable in Devon.
Oh.
And then I've come all the way back over to here, so...
You're real travelling, working...
Well, you've got to go... When you're me, you've got to go wherever the work is, and sometimes it's at places where they've never heard of you or seen you before.
And sometimes it's a basement in Paddington, like
yeah,
tonight.
exactly, yeah.
You'll do anything for the money. OK, let's get some questions from this audience. Our first question comes from Jackie. Hi, Jackie, hello.
Hello. Is free speech safe in Ireland?
It's a very good question. Of course, we've been covering the... threats to free speech in Ireland for a number of months now because the Irish government was sort of determined to push through its new hate speech bill, which, by the way, in which its legislation defined hatred as hatred. So that's convenient. Yeah. It could basically mean anything at all. But now the Minister for Justice has dropped plans for this. Helen McEntee has said that she's not going to include the hate speech element in the hate crime legislation. But, Jojo, there is still potential problems with this legislation anyway, because it uses terms that a lot of people don't agree with.
Yeah.
But it is good news, though, isn't it, that they're not going to criminalise hatred when the government themselves can't define what it means.
Yeah, well, that's part of the difficulty, is not being able to decide what is what.
Well,
but also,
yes.
it's only a temporary measure because she's determined to get it through.
Now, of course, you come from Scotland.
Yes.
They pushed through their hate speech legislation.
Did.
That turned out to be a bit of a disaster.
Well, it was a disaster because Hamza Yousaf ended up having however many complaints against him as soon as it was introduced.
Yes.
For hate speech and his inaugural speech when he was saying that Scotland was too white, the judiciary was too white, the police was too white. And
yeah, I remember.
So, yeah, there was hundreds of complaints against him that it was hate speech.
And that just proves the point, doesn't it? That if you can't define what hate is, anyone can phone up and say, well, I perceive that to be hateful.
Yeah,
you know?
well, and that's the thing, it's interpretation rather than... And also, we have hate speech laws. Do you know what I mean? You're not allowed to, say things and be insightful to
we have
against
laws
race.
against incitement to violence.
Yes, incitement to violence. But how you say something, and if you're saying something a particular way against something that is a crime, so if you're pointing out something that someone's done hideously, grooming gangs or whatever,
yes.
If you say it in the wrong manner, that is the crime rather than the crime.
And that's happened a lot,
Which
hasn't it, Paul? Where, people saying things about what happened with the grooming gang situation found themselves speaking indelicately and being arrested.
Yeah, absolutely, and you should be able to speak without being delicate at all about that particular crime. It's disgusting.
And we've also had people, of course, given really draconian jail terms recently for admittedly horrible tweets. But my issue with that is I don't think the police should be arresting people for even saying horrible things, because that's the price you pay for living in a free society.
No, absolutely, and I'm an advocate for free speech. I mean, I probably don't believe it's absolute, so there is some grey areas. However, I find myself in a very peculiar situation agreeing with Sinn Féin. Sinn Féin.
What?
Yes, I've chosen today to come out because Sinn Féin. If you read what they say about this, they don't believe in this hate speech law either.
Right.
They're completely against this, and it just goes to prove a point, in that there is no consensus across the Irish government, across the Irish Parliament for this, as there isn't in the British or Scottish or Welsh parliaments either, and that's the problem. Nobody can define what hate speech is, and I'm actually rapidly forming the opinion that hate speech is no issue whatsoever, and it's something that's been invented by politicians to get them elected.
Well, this is the point. Well, if you say that hate is illegal, and then a future political party says, well, we think that criticising the government is hateful, then you have a legislation that justifies them locking people up.
So it's not a law as such, but in terms of how behaviours have changed, so obviously I'm a stand-up comedian and I do these clips online and blah, 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 and I'm clearly in a comedy club, I've got a microphone, it's got a comedy club sign, hot water, whatever, but videos will get taken down. So I do a joke about my daughter and that she needs shooting. It's taken down because it's inciting violence. And you're going, it's a joke, it's clearly a joke from a comedian about her child.
Yes.
But there's no recourse. You can appeal it.
And by the way, something that many parents have said about their children.
Yeah, but this is
that as well.
But this is what we're talking about. This is what we're actually looking towards making criminal.
Well, because
at the moment it just gets
context is key.
It's getting taken down off my Instagram annoyingly after 1 million views.
Really?
Yeah.
Because
oh,
you're
gone viral.
actually inciting hatred against your daughter.
Yeah, so that can be taken down. There's no criminal charges. But what we're discussing here is that potentially that is what we're looking at.
Yes.
That my saying that on a video clip is hate speech.
Very disturbing. And it sounds insane, what Jojo is saying, but actually the Scottish police were receiving training on what to do with offensive jokes delivered by comedians in a comedy club.
Yeah.
So it's not out of the realms of possibility. We're going to move on now to a question from Anne. Anne, hello.
Hello. Should Sandra Brindley resign as chief exec of the rape crisis in Scotland?
Yes.
Yeah, this has been a huge Jojo straight in. Yes. I mean, it's a huge story. I should explain for the people at home, because Sandy Brindley is chief executive of Rape Crisis Scotland, and she, of course, presided over the recent scandal where you had a male trans activist hired as the head of Edinburgh Rape Crisis Centre. And I would have thought, quite obviously, Jojo, women who have suffered sexual assault want to go to a space where there are no men present. That's a legitimate request. This is not bigotry. This is not hateful. No. So why won't Sandy Brindley take responsibility for what's going on?
Because we're ever moving into that situation, people don't want to say what they think that people don't want to hear. It's that she's terrified of being piled on. She thinks she's on the right side of gender politics, gender identity. And this isn't about whether somebody who's, you know, trans woman running a CEO. It's about the women that have been through a situation. And you can argue with me till you're blue in the face. If you've been brought up as a man, if you have lived in a society where you've been treated as a man, if you have lived in a masculine... The trans CEO grew up in India, a particularly male-dominated society where women are marginalised, and you are incredibly ingrained with that thought process.
Yeah.
I know when I'm speaking to a woman compared to how I'm speaking to a man, and whether you feel like a woman, you have been brought up and you have been treated as a man, and there is no way on any earth you can tell me that you know, because I adopted ways of coping as you're growing up as a woman in a woman's space, how we live in a different arena to men. We know this.
Yeah.
So do not come and tell me that you are a woman, because you will reply and respond as a man, even if you're identifying as a woman. End of.
And of course, there's another issue, isn't there, which is, you know, we could say that if this individual was being discriminated against in employment terms for a job at a supermarket or something, or a job at a library, whatever, we'd always say, well, you shouldn't discriminate based on their biological sex. But this is a rape crisis centre. This is a different... This is where you are allowed to apply the sex discrimination law.
100%, because if you have been raped as a woman, as I have, sadly, and I'm sure probably not the only one in here, that a man will never understand how that feels. Now, I'm not saying that Rindy doesn't understand sexual assault, but it is a different type of sexual assault. We have been brought up to walk, you know, looking over our shoulders and being careful. They went to school in an all-boys Catholic school. So, again, the way that you are, you're a product of your environment. And the frustration, it's not about not accepting people who are trans. It's not about not saying, you know, trans women. Trans women are trans women, of course they are. But they're not women. They can't be women, because until you have lived and walked in my shoes as a woman, you will never know what it's like. But other women do.
Yeah.
But if you've been brought up with a male brain and a male environment, it's not about how you feel, it's about other people, how they treat you. And if you've been treated as a man, your response in a civilised situation is to respond as a man.
Very interesting. Paul, I mean, I think Jojo makes an excellent point, and I don't think it should be considered bigotry or hateful to acknowledge that people who identify as trans women are trans women, but they're not women. And that's...
It's as simple as that.
It's a matter of fact.
Quite frankly, I think that Sandy Brinley should watch what Jojo Sutherland just said and politely hand her notice in.
Can I ask a question, actually? And obviously physically not possible for me to. As a black woman, can I begin to understand or know how you have been brought up, the situations that you felt, and how you've been treated in society as a black woman compared to a white woman?
Oh, OK.
So if I...
Jojo, we can't hear the audience, unfortunately, but the point you're making is that obviously we all grow up in our own situations.
Yeah.
We all know what we have experienced.
And I would be absolutely hammered if I said, well, I'm absolutely...
Yes.
I know how to live as a black woman. I'm exactly the same as a black woman.
We can give a mic to our audience member now if you want to talk. Yeah, is that mic working?
Yes.
No, I don't think you could possibly know what it's like to walk in my shoes.
So, if I could become a black woman, you would accept me as a black woman and say, yes, you absolutely get how I am.
Well, once again, you couldn't just become a black woman overnight because you'd have had to have been born and lived the life. So
yeah,
and it's
very
very
I agree with what you're saying.
You mentioned that because it sounds impossible, but there was a woman called Rachel Dolezal, a white woman, who identified as a black woman and became the head of the NAACP. And that, you know, so these things, you know, they do happen, and it sounds made up, but it's absolutely real. Anyway, we're going to have to move on. Fascinating topic, but we will have to move on at this point. We're going to your question from Kim.
Oh, I am Kim.
Oh, Kim's... You sit here, darling. You come and have a seat here.
It's going to become your show, Kim.
It is.
Get out of that seat.
My question is, should feminists be allowed at party conferences?
You know, I'm glad you mentioned this because there have been a number of cases where certain groups have applied to be at the Labour Party conference or the Liberal Democrat Party conference and been turned down. I'm thinking in particular of LGB Alliance, actually, of course, whose founders have been on this show. And the latest case of discrimination along this line is Plaid Cymru, Party of Wales, and they've now admitted that they unlawfully discriminated against a feminist charity. This is a charity called Philia. It's a feminist charity, women's rights charity, and they'd been in contact with Plaid Cymru and they said, we want to be at your stall, we want to be at your conference, we want to have a stall at your conference, but less than 48 hours before the conference was due to start, the charity had the booking cancelled. And Philia is just the latest example of this, Paul. As I said, this has happened at other conferences. Yep. Why can't it just be the case that political parties say, we're about politics, we're about discussion, let's have all people at the conferences, and you know, this is a women's rights organisation. It's not like you're asking the KKK to come in.
No, hopefully they don't.
I would actually draw the line.
Sure. But this is the point, isn't there? There's kind of this narcissism around this ideology now, where one person or an oligarch of a few people believe that because they support a view, that their view must be the view that everybody else follows. Plaid Cymru is a broad church.
Yes.
You know, in the sense that its members, its voters, don't all think and say the same things. So you have to invite people to the conference that have different views, I think. And what was very interesting about this is, yes, they apologised, but they apologised saying we have to because of the law as it stands now.
Not because it's the morally right,
and not because
which suggests. A, it's not the morally right thing to do, and B, they would change the law if they could. I think that's more terrifying than turning down this woman's opportunity to speak 48 hours before conference.
There's a few parties that have had this problem. The SNP is another party of this kind. Liberal Democrats, Green Party. I've had former deputy leader of the Green Party on my show talking about how he's been through a court case with his party because they get this wrong. Shouldn't it be the case that irrespective of the views of Plaid Cymru, of the people in charge of Plaid Cymru, they should say, let them come along and make their case?
Yeah, absolutely. And that was what was the most disturbing thing about it was basically the accusation that they had a different opinion.
That was it, basically.
Wow. So, I mean, why are we having this discussion? What are we talking about? Let's all just, you know, inject ourselves with something and think the same way, and then we'll all be fine.
Yeah, that seems to be the way we're going, right?
How dull.
Yeah, really dull. A disagreement is fun.
Yes, of course it is. As long as you don't hurt anyone physically.
Exactly. So, Paul, no punching people in the face.
No. Yeah. I told you I wouldn't again.
Good, good. Well, look, next up on Free Speech Nation, the group Free Speech Brighton claimed that they were kicked out of a pub this week for having a speaker who wanted to discuss gender ideology in schools. So I've got two members of the group are going to be joining me in just one moment here in the studio. Please don't go anywhere.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Jubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
The Britain I grew up in was the most peaceful, gentle society that has ever existed. That has been destroyed.
Opinion polls show immigration is the #1 concern to the British public.
Are you proud to be British?
Yeah, I'm ever so proud.
My name is Stephen Edgington, and in this documentary, I want to find out how Britain became a nation of immigrants. Immigration, the truth, available at gbnews.com.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This Monday, the king of breakfast TV is back. That's right, Britain's favourite TV host, Eamon Holmes, returns to Britain's hottest breakfast programme. Breakfast every day from 6 a.m. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. This week, Free Speech Brighton, a sister group of the Free Speech Union, claimed that they were kicked out of a pub in the city for discussing trans issues in schools. The group booked a room in a pub for an evening of speeches and discussion when they claimed security guards came and asked them to leave after one speaker began to talk about this topic. Now, a clip of the evening was, in fact, posted to social media. Let's have a look at this.
This is Britain. It doesn't have to be offence. Yes, what's the complaint? Who from? From the management of this property. Well, then they can tell us. No, they don't have to.
It's a private premises. So now we've been asked to leave. Anyone refusing is now trespassing.
OK, we did contact the pub for comment. However, they did not respond. But with me now are two members of Free Speech Brighton, Laura King and Emma Wall. Welcome both to the show. Laura, I want to come to you first as chair of this group. We saw there in the clip the security guard actually pulling away the speaker or attempting to dismantle your equipment.
Yes.
It seems very heavy-handed. Can you give us some background to what happened, what the event was for, and why you booked it?
Our normal pub was being refurbished, so about 3 weeks ago I went in and booked a local pub for a meeting, and they didn't ask any questions about what sort of meeting. It was in a back room. It was mainly secluded from the rest of the pub, so I thought it would be fine. But anyway, they didn't ask any questions. They took my booking. We arrived, I set up. The first speaker started speaking, who's a retired teacher who is concerned about trans in schools and how that affects children. But she was talking purely about children. She was not talking about adults who have protected characteristics, obviously. And then towards the end of her speech, I became aware of security guards standing behind me in the middle room. So I went to have a quick word with them and see what they wanted. And they said, we've had a complaint. And I said, what's the complaint? And they wouldn't say. Then they said, will you come and talk to the landlord? So I went to the front of the bar and they indicated this chap was the landlord, but he looked about 20, so I don't think he was the landlord. So I said, I hear you have a complaint about us. Can you tell me what it is? And he couldn't. And I said, look, we're doing 3 different talks, completely different subjects. We're in an enclosed space. Please tell me what the problem is. And he wouldn't. So
well, that sounds very Kafka-esque, as though you've committed a crime, but they can't tell you what the crime is.
Well, that's what I couldn't understand, because, you know, you might... Obviously, they can't tell you who the complainant is, but they should be able to tell you what the complaint is.
What were the other talks that you had scheduled for that night?
Well, the next talk was actually by the champion of direct democracy in this country, Neil Petrie, and ironically the third speech was by a lady called Simone on, ironically, government overreach.
Government overreach?
Yes.
OK, well, there we go. So, Emma, can I bring you in now? Because you witnessed the whole thing.
Yeah.
This sounds extraordinary, you know, a free speech event. We've seen a number of gender-critical feminist events being booted out or having this kind of treatment, which is also appalling. This actually wasn't a gender-critical feminist event. This was a free speech event.
Yeah.
And had people presumably disagreed with what the speaker was saying, there's a forum there to discuss it. Isn't that the case?
There is. I'm not sure that they're completely aware of that. They could easily... It would have been far less antagonistic if they'd just come in and said, we don't actually agree with what you're saying.
Yes.
I couldn't exactly tell. There was a curtain, and my friend who was sat next to me said she could see somebody beyond the curtain who was obviously kind of
so you think someone overheard?
I think so, but maybe just picked up snippets, because it was very much about the safeguarding of children, and it was about what's going into schools that we're not aware of. But yeah, there were other topics coming up.
And then what did the security guards do?
They came in and they said, well, obviously we had a complaint, and we need you all to leave, basically. And we're a bunch of people who kind of know our rights, and we were saying, well, we haven't done anything. Well, why are they asking us to leave? We're not committing... There is no victim here. We're just quietly having a chat.
Yes.
But they were very heavy-handed.
Well, we can see that from the video, of course. And so what eventually happened, Laura? Did you all, in fact, leave the pub?
Well, actually, they first... I thought I'd sorted it out, and then I saw them advancing into the room, and then somebody tried to grab the speaker, and it was still plugged in, and it was my speaker, so I intervened and said, you can't steal that speaker, you can't damage it, it's mine, and it's still plugged in, and they tried to ignore me, and they grabbed my arm, and I said, that's assault. I'm going to report you to the police. And then they let go of my arm, and I managed to get the speaker back. And meantime, the rest of them were pouring into the room and saying to everyone they have to leave. And people were pretty incredulous, and they had drinks in their hand. And I said, why do we have to leave? We haven't done anything.
Yes.
And it was literally 50 people of like 25 to 80 age range just enjoying a chat, listening to the speaker. And then they were going to get a Q&A afterwards, and then the next speaker after the drinks break. And
the security guards looked pretty hefty to me.
They had stab vests on. It was ridiculous.
Well, I mean, you look very, very dangerous, Laura, I have to say. I mean, this is just an absolutely astonishing thing to have happened. And now I believe the Free Speech Union have got involved. They're looking into this because the views that the speaker was espousing are protected by law under the Equality Act. Of course, the gender-critical views are protected. So booting someone out on those grounds, of course, it's difficult, isn't it? Because the pub haven't said why they did it, or they haven't said what the complaint was. What was the general atmosphere in there like? How did people feel?
Well, free speech is free speech. That is, at the end of the day, it doesn't actually matter what you're talking about. We have to have the right. If we're not able to speak about everything we want to speak about, then we're living in a police state.
Yes.
And maybe we need to have signs made up to invite people in, because obviously we get an email telling us that this thing's happening. We're members.
Yes.
But it's just... Yeah, I mean, we've had other talks in another pub about also. I've done a couple of talks there, and nothing's ever happened.
Never been a problem.
No, it was obviously it was that subject for sure.
It must have been. I mean, I certainly.